Every month, the U.S. government pays millions of dollars to the people who created the tool to anonymously trade drugs and weapons. It's not a budgetary error. It's part of the plan. My name is Mr. Darkweb, and today you will learn why anonymity on the Darknet was an illusion from the very beginning. But before we begin, can I have your attention for a second? If this is your first time here, or if you're just watching us unsubscribed, please subscribe to the channel. It helps promote the videos and the recommendations. It's literally one click for you and a huge benefit to the channel. And thank you all so much for your support. Imagine the situation. You create a technology to protect your agents. 7 layers of encryption, routing through random nodes around the world, untraceable sender or receiver, perfect anonymity, and then you take that technology and make it public. You publish the source code. You encourage everyone to use it. Dissidents, journalists, activists, and yes, criminals too. But why? The official version sounds noble. They say that anonymity only works when it is used en masse. If it's just agents, any activity gives them away. You need noise to hide the signal. Makes sense. Almost too logical. But there's another version. A version that doesn't get published in press releases. What if the goal wasn't to protect freedom? What if the goal was to create a space where people would self-disclose? A laboratory where you can study criminal thinking in real time, where every click, every purchase, every message builds a personality profile. In May of 2021, one subject controlled 380 output nodes on the Tor network. That's 23% of all outputs. 1 in 4 users who thought they were invisible actually went through those nodes. And no one knows who the unsub was. A hacker, a criminal organization, or someone else. The Thor project received $8 million from the U.S. State Department in 2024, more than any other time in history. The technology through which 90% of the world's drug trade on the Darknet is funded by those who fight it. A paradox or a perfectly thought-out plan? To understand what happened in 2020, you have to go back 25 years to the sterile corridors of a military laboratory where 3 mathematicians were solving a problem that would change the internet forever. They didn't know what they were creating, or did they? The story began on the 23rd of May in the year 1995. U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, NRL for short. East Coast, just outside Washington, D.C. A place where only the highest level of secrecy is allowed. In 1995, they were working on a problem that seemed unsolvable. Paul Siverson, a mathematician with 20 years' experience working for the Navy, specializing in cryptography and information theory. Michael Reed, an expert in secure communications. David Goldschlag, a programmer who had a knack for turning mathematical concepts into working code. The 3 men sat on a problem that was costing the lives of American agents around the world. Imagine an agent in Tehran. He needs to transmit critical information to Langley. Conventional encryption protects the content but does not hide the fact of communication. Anyone who intercepts the traffic can see that this man is communicating with U.S. intelligence. Even if he can't read the message, the mere fact of communication is a death sentence. What was needed was a system that hides not only what is being transmitted, but also who is communicating with whom. Total anonymity of communication. The task seemed impossible. Siverson came up with an idea that changed everything. He called it onion routing. Just as an onion is made up of layers, a message would be wrapped in multiple layers of encryption. The data passes through a chain of servers. Each server peels off only one layer, knowing neither the source nor the final recipient. The first node knows the sender but does not know the addressee. The last node knows the addressee but does not know the sender. The middle nodes know nothing. The concept was brilliant, but there was one huge problem that the military did not realize immediately. If this system is used only by American agents, then any activity on the network automatically gives them away. Imagine an empty desert road with only CIA vehicles driving along it. Any observer would instantly know who was driving. Anonymity only works in a crowd, and there was no crowd. For the next 7 years, the team worked in the strictest secrecy. The code was written and rewritten. Every line was checked for vulnerabilities. Eventually, the technology worked. The system provided foolproof anonymity, but only in theory. In practice, it was useless without mass use. And then a decision was made that seems crazy at first glance. In the year 2002, the source code was published under a free license. Anyone could download it, study it, modify it, use it. Software developed by military intelligence on the taxpayer's dime was available to everyone, including enemies of the United States. The official explanation sounded reasonable. Open source code allows thousands of specialists to check it for vulnerabilities and backdoors. That builds trust. More users, better anonymity. It all makes sense. But there was another reason that was not spoken aloud. The military wanted the technology to be used en masse. They needed their agents to blend into the crowd of regular users. Activists, journalists, dissidents, paranoid, and yes, criminals too. The more noise, the easier it is to hide the signal. It wasn't a side effect. It was part of the design. On the 20th of September in the year 2002, the network was launched. The first nodes were deployed on servers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and several universities that cooperated with the Pentagon. In the first few days, several megabytes of data passed through the system. Test messages, checking connections, nothing serious. No one could have guessed that in 10 years' time, tons of drugs, weapons, and things that are scary to think about would be sold through the same technology. Civilian developers began to join the project, enthusiasts who believed in the idea of a free internet. Among them was a young mathematician from MIT named Roger Dingledine. He was known online as ARMA. It was he who turned military development into a global phenomenon. Dingledine saw technology as more than a tool for spies. He saw an opportunity to give people true freedom on the internet. Freedom from corporate surveillance. Freedom from censorship by authoritarian regimes. Freedom to be themselves without fear of persecution. Together with colleague Nick Mathewson, known as Nickum, Dingledine began improving the code, making it faster, more reliable, easier to use. They worked day and night, obsessed with creating the perfect anonymity system. By the year 2004, a turning point had occurred. Someone came up with a revolutionary idea. If you can hide the client, why not hide the server? That's how hidden services came to be. Sites that exist only inside the Tor network. Sites with addresses ending in onion. Sites whose physical location cannot be determined. The first hidden services were forums for discussing cryptography and privacy. Innocent, even useful resources. But the technology had been created, and there was no way to stop its spread. In 2006 year, the event that finally determined the fate of the project took place. Tor Project Incorporated was created, an official nonprofit organization registered in the USA, and that's where the fun begins. Guess who became the main sponsor of this organization? the government of the United States of America, Department of State, Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA. All of them lined up to fund a technology that has already begun to be used by criminals. In 2012, 80% of the Tor project's budget, $2 million, came from the U.S. government. The State Department, the Broadcasting Board of Governors, and the National Science Foundation were the main funders. The official purpose sounded noble: to help defenders of democracy in authoritarian states. But there was another reason, which was not publicized. American agents around the world depended on this technology. It was used to liaise with informants in Iran, China, Russia, to coordinate operations in the Middle East, to protect sources in terrorist organizations. Shutting down the project meant blinding U.S. intelligence. And the fact that drug traffickers were using the technology in parallel? That was considered an acceptable loss. But some people realized where things were going. In the archives of the developer's correspondence, which got into the network, there is a letter from one of the early participants of the project. He wrote that the team was building a monster, that sooner or later the technology would be used for something so terrible that they wouldn't be able to sleep at night. He was quietly removed from the project. By the year 2010, several terabytes of data were passing through Tor every day. The network had thousands of nodes around the world. In this digital fog, something new was taking shape. Black markets, forums with banned content, services you'd rather not know about. The technology worked as planned. It provided anonymity. But for whom, exactly? For the agents who needed to protect their lives, or for those who were watching everyone else? The paradox was that the creators realized the vulnerability of the system from the start. Anyone who controls enough nodes can start correlating traffic. If you see when data enters the network and when it leaves, you can figure out the relationship between sender and receiver. It's called a correlation attack, and there's no defense against it. It's maths. The makers knew it. The military knew it. But they went ahead with the project anyway. They made it public anyway. They kept funding it anyway. But why? Maybe because the vulnerability was not a bug, but a feature. Maybe the system was designed precisely to create the illusion of security. A place where people feel invisible, and that's why they reveal everything they hide. But these are just assumptions. The facts start to speak for themselves later, when other agencies come into play, with different capabilities and different goals. This story continued in the year 2013 when a man brought a thumb drive to the newspaper's editorial office with documents that turned the perception of how internet surveillance works upside down. Edward Snowden, a 30-year-old system administrator at the National Security Agency. In June of 2013, he met with journalists from The Guardian and The Washington Post in a hotel room in Hong Kong. What he showed them changed the perception of privacy on the internet. The documents revealed a scale of surveillance that few people suspected. The NSA was collecting data on everyone: call metadata, web browsing history, emails, messenger messages, programs codenamed Prism, Muscular, Tempora. But among all these programs, there was one that dealt directly with Tor. Turmoil, a project that started around the year 2005. It wasn't just a surveillance program. It was an entire infrastructure for intercepting and analyzing internet traffic. Turmoil consisted of sensors installed at critical points on the internet, where backbone cables cross the oceans, where traffic passes between continents. These sensors could do one important thing. They could recognize Tor traffic among billions of other data packets. Special digital fingerprints allowed them to pick out Tor connections from the general stream. That didn't mean the NSA could read the encrypted content, but it knew who was using Tor. Next, X-keyscore came into play, an analysis tool that NSA developers called a system that allows you to see almost everything a target does on the internet. X-keyscore took data from turmoil, sorted it, and made it searchable. Analysts could enter queries and get real-time information about users. One of the slides from the NSA presentation showed that X-keyscore was specifically set up to track people who visited the Tor project website or were looking for information about privacy technologies. The very use of the security tools made the person suspicious. Paradox: the attempt to hide attracted attention, but intercepting metadata was only the first level. The real magic started further down. Turbine, an automated system for controlling implants. Implants referred to spyware that the NSA inserted into the target's computers. Turbine was designed to scale operations to millions of infected devices. Not hundreds, not thousands, millions. The system worked in conjunction with turmoil. When the sensors detected an interesting target, they sent a signal to Turbine. The system decided whether or not to implant the implant. If yes, a mechanism called quantum was triggered. Quantum is a set of techniques for attacking users in real time. Imagine you are requesting a web page. The request goes over the internet to a server. The server sends a response back. But what if someone can intercept your request and send a response faster than the real server? A fake response containing malicious code. It's called a proxy attack, but in an accelerated mode. The NSA had servers called FoxACID located at strategic points on the internet. These servers were configured to respond faster than any legitimate server. When Quantum intercepted a request from a target, FoxACID would send an infected page in a fraction of a second. According to the documents, the entire operation from target detection to implantation took 686 milliseconds. The NSA paid particular attention to Tor users. One presentation explicitly stated that Tor was a priority target. A slide with the title "Tor Stinks" showed that the agency faced serious challenges. It was impossible to crack Tor cryptography itself, but it was possible to attack the browser. Tor uses a modified version of Firefox. Vulnerabilities in the browser allowed malicious code to be injected that revealed the user's real IP address. The technology was called browser exploit. Infect a computer, bypass Tor's protection, and gain access to a real identity. But even the NSA recognized that mass de-anonymization of Tor users is technically difficult and politically risky. Every successful attack runs the risk of being discovered. If you use an exploit too often, someone will notice. The Tor community will patch the vulnerability. The tool will become useless, so we needed a different approach. More subtle, more scalable, and that approach existed. Tor works thanks to volunteers who run repeater nodes on their servers. Anyone can become part of the network. All you have to do is download the software, set up a server, and run it. The more nodes, the more reliable the network. This is the cornerstone of the whole concept. But what if some of these nodes belong to non-volunteers? Snowden's documents hinted that the NSA was running its own Tor nodes. Officially, it was called network research. Unofficially, it was a way to get positions within the system. If you control the input node, you see who's entering the network. If you control the output node, you see where the user goes. If you control both, you can associate identities with actions. This is the correlation attack that Tor's creators warned about from the beginning. Mathematically, it is inevitable. If an adversary sees both ends of a communication, anonymity is destroyed. The question is not whether such an attack is possible. The question is who is doing it and on what scale. In February of the year 2014, something strange happened on the Tor network. Administrators noticed a massive influx of new hosts. Hundreds of computers from the same IP address range joined the network at the same time. It was unusual, suspicious. Project Tor monitored activity but did not take action immediately. Wanted to figure out what was going on. Observed, collected data, waiting. Meanwhile, these nodes were doing their job. They were intercepting traffic. They were correlating timestamps. They were collecting information about users of hidden services. It later emerged that researchers from Carnegie Mellon University were behind the attack. A team from CERT, a division of the Computer Emergency Response Center. They developed a method for de-anonymizing Tor users and tested it in real-life conditions. The attack worked. Researchers were able to identify users of the hidden services. They were supposed to present the results at a security conference, but suddenly canceled. No explanation. Then there were rumors that the FBI had paid the university $1 million for the information collected during the experiment. Officially, the FBI denied this. The Tor project released a patch that closed the vulnerability, but the attack ran from February to July of 2014, 5 months. During that time, millions of users passed through the compromised hosts. Which of them have been identified? How many people revealed their identities thinking they were protected? There are no answers. The data is classified. But the repercussions came very quickly. On the 6th of November, 2014, Operation Onimus began. Coordinated by Europol and the FBI, police forces from 16 countries were involved. The goal was a simultaneous attack on black markets on the Darknet. At 4 o'clock in the morning GMT, agents around the world received the command to act. Bulgaria, Lithuania, Romania, Czech Republic, the Netherlands. At the same time, servers hosting hidden services were seized. Official statements spoke of 400 closed sites. Then the figure was refined, 267 pages, making 27 separate sites. Among them were the big black markets: Silk Road, 2.0, Cloud9, Hydra, Pandora. 17 arrests, confiscation of $1 million in bitcoins plus 180,000 euros in cash. But the main thing was not the scale of the operation. The main question was, how did they do it? A Europol spokesman made a vague comment. He said the methods would remain secret, that the agency wants to retain the ability to use them over and over again. When asked about technical details, he replied that it was not subject to disclosure. Tor project spokesman Andrew Luhman suggested that authorities use traditional policing methods. For example, tracking Bitcoin transactions. That claims of a Tor hacker exaggerated and intended for psychological effect, to scare criminals into abandoning the technology. But many experts thought otherwise. There were too many coincidences. The Carnegie Mellon attack ended in July. Operation Onimus hit in November. The gap is only 4 months. The data collected during the study matched perfectly with what was needed for the operation. Moreover, court documents that came later explicitly stated that the FBI de-anonymized the Silk Road Administrator 2.0 in May 2014, exactly in May, in the midst of the Carnegie Mellon attack. Coincidence? Or confirmation that the research experiment was a cover for an intelligence operation? The university declined to comment. The FBI denied paying the $1 million payment. The Tor project closed the vulnerability and urged everyone to update their software. But questions remained. Operation Animus was supposed to be the end of the Darknet. At least that's what law enforcement thought. 17 arrests, 27 sites shut down, millions of dollars seized. The message was clear: you will be found, even at Tor. But the opposite has happened. 48 hours after the operation, new markets appeared on the Darknet. Abraxas, Nucleus, Alphabay, Hansa. They promised enhanced security, mandatory encryption of all communications, multi-signature Bitcoin transactions, decentralized servers that can't be taken out in one fell swoop. In 6 months, the turnover of drug trade on the Darknet exceeded the pre-operational level twice as much. Hydra grew new heads, stronger and smarter than before. A secret Europol report that hit the net a few years later admitted defeat. The operation arrested people, confiscated money, shut down websites, but it didn't affect the ecosystem as a whole. Moreover, it forced criminals to improve their security measures. And now, for the most paradoxical part. On the 7th of November, 2014, the day after Operation Animus, the U.S. State Department transferred another tranche of funding to the Thor project, $3,400,000. More than the year before. Why? How can you fund technology that makes possible the crimes you are fighting? The answer is contained in the minutes of a closed-door meeting of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which appeared online after the leak. The CIA director was explaining simple maths to senators. There are over 1,000 U.S. agents and informants working through Tor. To cut off their funding is to sign their death warrant. Moreover, Tor is used to support the opposition in countries that the U.S. considers adversaries: Iran, China, Russia, North Korea. Dissidents rely on Tor to organize protests, leak information, and communicate with Western media. It is a soft power tool too valuable to pass up. One senator asked a logical question: is it possible to create a version of Tor just for the right people? Technology that protects dissidents but doesn't work for criminals? The answer was emphatic. No. Maths does not discriminate between intentions. Cryptography works the same way for everyone. Either privacy for everyone or privacy for no one. Compromise is impossible. Tor's creators found themselves in a situation that one of them later compared to that of Robert Oppenheimer. The creator of the atomic bomb was tormented for the rest of his life by the realization of what he had released into the world. Thor's developers realized that their creation was being used for evil, but there was nothing they could do. Unlike nuclear weapons, which can only be built by states with vast resources, Thor can be launched by anyone. The code is open. The technology is available. Even if the U.S. shuts down the official project, copies are already distributed around the world. The genie didn't just come out of the bottle, it multiplied. But while everyone was discussing the ethics and philosophy of anonymity, somewhere in the shadows an attack was being prepared that would reveal the true extent of the system's vulnerability. An attack that would affect not hundreds, but thousands of nodes. An attack that would last not months, but years. And it would begin in January of the year 2000. January of the year 2020. New exit nodes began to appear on the Tor network. Hundreds of servers were registering every week. This was unusual for a volunteer network, but not unprecedented. The project always welcomed new participants. The more nodes, the more reliable the system. But these knots were special. A security researcher known by the pseudonym Nusenu, who who has been monitoring the health of the Tor network for years, noticed a pattern. New nodes were appearing in groups, were using similar configurations. They were registering through specific hosting providers. It looked coordinated. By February, the number of suspicious nodes reached several hundred. By March, it was over 1,000. And in May of the year 2020, one subject controlled 380 output nodes. That was 23% of the Tor network's total output capacity. 1 in 4 users going from the Darknet to the regular internet went through these nodes. What did this mean in practice? The exit node is the last point in the Tor chain before traffic enters the regular internet. At this point, the Tor encryption is already removed. The exit node operator can see exactly where the user is going and what he is doing. It doesn't see who exactly is doing it. Tor hides the source IP address, but it can see the actions. And here's someone controlling 23% of all such outlets. Nusenu continued monitoring and detected strange activity. These hosts were conducting an attack called SSL stripping. When a user tried to access the site over a secure HTTPS connection, the hosts intercepted the request and spoofed it with unprotected HTTP. The encryption was stripped. The data was sent in clear text. But why? The answer came quickly. The attackers were after cryptocurrency. They monitored traffic going to Bitcoin mixer services. These are services that mix coins from different users to break the link between sender and receiver. Very popular with criminals. When a user entered their Bitcoin wallet address on the mixer's website, malicious hosts would intercept that address. On the fly, they replaced it with the address of the attacker's wallet. The user thought they were sending coins to themselves. In reality, he was sending them to the thieves. A simple but effective scheme. Over months of work, they stole an amount that is impossible to estimate. The victims did not publicize the thefts. After all, they were doing something illegal themselves. The Tor project detected the attack at the end of May. On the 21st of June, they began removing malicious hosts from the network directory. By the end of June, they had removed most of them, but a few days later they came back. New servers, new IP addresses, same pattern. Second removal in July. Back again. A month later, the intruders already controlled 22% of the power output. Third sweep in August, and back again. This time to 20%. Nusenu noted that this was the worst year in terms of malicious activity in its entire observation period. It was the first time in history that a single entity controlled such a fraction of the network, and the first time it demonstrated such persistence and resources to recover from each removal. Who was this unsub? A lone hacker? An organized group? Or someone with more serious capabilities? Officially, the Tor project called it criminal activity aimed at stealing cryptocurrency, but there were details that didn't fit the picture of ordinary cyber theft. Firstly, scale. Running and maintaining 380 servers around the world requires serious resources. Not just money to rent, but infrastructure to manage. This is not a garage operation. Second, persistence. After each removal, the attackers rebuilt the network in less than a month. This requires planning, backup capacity ready for deployment. Thirdly, time. The attack began in January 2020 and lasted all year. Then in 2021, it reappeared. In May 2031, the attacker had already controlled 1,000 nodes. Not just output nodes, but intermediate nodes as well. If it was just stealing cryptocurrency, why do you need intermediate nodes? They can't see unencrypted traffic. They can't intercept wallet addresses. Their only value is in positioning them within the network for correlation analysis. And that's a different level of play. The correlation attack is a technique that Tor's creators warned you about from day one. It works like this. If you control the input node, you can see when a user enters a network and how much data is sent. If you control the output node, you can see when traffic leaves and where it goes. You can't see the content, it's encrypted, but you can see timestamps and volumes. Now you apply the maths. You look at when user A sent a request through the input node. You look at when the same amount of data went out through the output node to site B. If the timestamps match, taking into account the routing delay, there's a good chance it's the same data stream. Repeat the analysis for multiple sessions. Build an activity profile. After a few days or weeks, you can associate a specific user with specific actions with a high degree of certainty. This isn't cracking cryptography, it's metadata analysis. It's mathematically proven that Tor has no defense against such an attack. The only defense is that the attacker doesn't control both ends of the connection, but if he controls 23% of the outputs, the probability of hitting a compromised route increases with each session. The Tor project publicly recognizes this vulnerability in its documentation. It says explicitly, if an attacker can observe traffic in and out, anonymity is at risk. It's not a bug, it's a mathematical limitation of the technology. But here's a question. If this is a known problem, why is the system designed this way? One could argue that there is no other way. Decentralization requires openness. Anyone can start a node. Otherwise, it is not a volunteer network, but a closed club. And in a closed club, agents become visible again. But there's another angle. What if vulnerability is not accidental? What if the system is designed to create the illusion of security while leaving surveillance to those with the resources? Think about it from an intelligence perspective. You have a technology that attracts anyone with something to hide. Dissidents, journalists, activists, but also criminals, terrorists, hackers. They all use the same system, thinking they are protected. Now imagine you're quietly running hundreds of nodes, keeping it low profile, disguised as volunteers. Year after year, you increase your presence. In 5 years, you control 10% of the network. In 10 years, 20%. You don't break encryption. You're not implementing backdoors. You're just observing. You collect metadata, build link graphs, profiling behavior. Most users remain anonymous. You don't have the resources to keep track of everyone, but interesting targets eventually make their way to your nodes. The statistics work for you. Most importantly, no one can accuse you of hacking. You're just participating in an open volunteer network, doing the same thing as thousands of other node operators. The only difference is scale and purpose. This is not conspiracy theories. It is a logical conclusion from known facts. Fact 1. The NSA has programs to intercept internet traffic on a massive scale. The Snowden documents confirm this. Fact 2. The NSA is specifically targeting Tor users. The presentation showed this. Fact 3. Correlation attack works if you control enough nodes. The maths proves it. Fact 4. Anyone can run Tor nodes. The barrier to entry is minimal. Fact 5. Someone started 380 nodes in 2020 and maintained them for months despite deletions. You put these facts together and you get a picture that looks like an ideal surveillance system. Not total. There aren't enough resources for everyone, but selective, targeted, behavioral. Now add another layer. The Darknet is not just a place to buy drugs. It's an ecosystem where people behave in ways they don't behave on the regular internet. No social constraints. Without fear of repercussions, or with minimal fear, believing themselves to be protected. What does a person buy on the Darknet? It speaks about his desires, which he hides from society? How does he communicate on the forums? It shows his real thinking without filters. Who's he making connections with? This reveals his network of contacts in the shadow world. Every action on the Darknet is data, not just metadata about traffic, but behavioral data about an individual, about who a person really is when they think no one can see them. In terms of psychology, this is called covert observation. When the subject does not know he is being observed, he behaves naturally, reveals true motives, true desires, true fears. Imagine a laboratory the size of the internet where millions of people categorize themselves: drug buyer, a gun dealer, a purchaser of forged documents, hacker, activist, dissident, paranoid, curious. You don't arrest them all. That's impossible and pointless. But you observe. You collect patterns. You build patterns of behavior. You understand how the criminal mind works, how underground networks are organized, how information spreads in the dark. And when necessary, you choose a specific goal and apply the whole arsenal of techniques: correlation analysis, Bitcoin tracking, undercover agents, hacking through browser vulnerabilities, old-fashioned police work. But it's not about the arrest. It's about knowledge, understanding the environment, the ability to predict the behavior of entire groups of people based on data gathered through years of covert surveillance. The Darknet is becoming not a place of freedom, but a place of classification, a sorting center of human intentions, where everyone tags themselves with their actions, not knowing that these tags are stored and analyzed. Sound like a dystopia? It might, but look at the facts again. The technology was created by the military for their own purposes, made it public to gain a critical mass of users. They continue to fund it despite its criminal use. At the same time, created infrastructure for mass interception and analysis of traffic. Demonstrated the ability to run their own nodes. Conducted de-anonymization operations, the methods of which remain secret. And in 2020, somebody showed that you can control a quarter of the network, and nobody can prevent it. Because the system is open. Because that's the way it's designed. This is not proof of a conspiracy. It's a demonstration of a vulnerability that can be exploited by anyone with enough resources. The question is not whether anyone can do it. The question is who exactly is doing it right now. The Tor project has been fighting malicious nodes from 2020 all year. You remove them, they come back. Remove again, they came back. By the end of the year, activity had decreased, but not completely stopped. In April 2020, the project cut staff by 30% due to lack of funding in a pandemic. Fewer people to monitor the network. Fewer resources to deal with the attacks. And funding from the US government kept coming because agents depended on technology, because dissidents in authoritarian countries needed protection, because geopolitical interests demanded the preservation of the tool. It's a vicious circle. Created the technology to protect, opened it up to everyone to make the defense work, can't shut it down because they depend on it, can't fully control it because it's decentralized, but they can monitor it through nodes they run themselves or those who cooperate with them. And every user who enters the Darknet thinking he is invisible is actually entering a laboratory where their behavior can be recorded, analyzed, classified, not necessarily today, maybe tomorrow, or a year from now, or 5 years from now, when the technology to analyze it is even more powerful. Anonymity is not an absolute state. It's a game of probabilities, and in this game, Those with more resources have the advantage. Always have, always will. The story of the 380 knots was over. But the questions remain, and as long as the Darknet exists, these questions will be relevant. Right now, there are 70 terabytes of data per second passing through the Tor network, 3 million users every day, and the US government continues to pay for it. In 2024, the State Department gave the Thor project $8 million, more than ever before. The technology that drives the drug trade is receiving record funding from those who fight it. Paul Siverson, the mathematician who invented onion routing in '95, still works in a Navy lab. He gets a salary from the Pentagon. In a rare interview, he said a phrase that explains a lot. You can't undo maths. Roger Dingledine is still the head of the Tor project. He is asked if he has any regrets. He answers with a question. Did Gutenberg regret the printing press when he found out that it was used to print more than just the Bible? The maths hasn't changed since '95. If you control both ends of the connection, anonymity disappears. That was known then. It's relevant now. The turnover of black markets on the Darknet in 2024 year exceeded $10 billion. This is more than the GDP of some countries. Hydra was closed in 2022, but dozens of new ones took its place. Alphabet was reborn. Decentralized markets have emerged that are technically impossible to shut down in one fell swoop. But there is another side to this. Right now, a journalist in Tehran is using Tor to pass on information about human rights abuses. An activist in Beijing is organizing protests through anonymous channels. A victim of domestic violence seeks help without fear of being tracked down. This is the kind of freedom the creators dreamed of. Two faces of the same technology: freedom and chaos, defense and crime, anonymity and surveillance. I began this story with a paradox. The government is funding technology that is being used against it. But maybe it's not a paradox. Maybe that's exactly how the system is supposed to work. Too many coincidences. Military development becomes public. Funding continues for decades, despite criminal use. The vulnerability has been known since day one, but there is no way to fix it yet. Someone is controlling hundreds of nodes, and the system can't prevent it. An accident or a perfectly thought-out plan? I don't know the answer. All I have are facts. Facts that can be interpreted in many different ways. The only thing that is certain is that the Darknet was never what it seemed. Anonymity was an illusion from the beginning, not because the technology doesn't work, but because those who created the system understood its weaknesses better than anyone else. As always, you're Mr. Dark Web.